Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily Digest. I'm Ben Olson, that's Nathan Fox. Together we're the founders of LSATdemon.com and our weekly podcast, Thinking LSAT. Here's what we talked about this week. We have a long email here from Anonymous.
Yeah, this is a wall of text from Anon. Hope it's worth it. Let's see. Hello, thanks for taking time to answer questions. I asked a question on the demon and got a great answer from Dylan and was hoping for some clarification from either of you or Dylan if he sees these emails. Dylan, of course, Dylan Horowitz. He did a couple episodes of the LSAT Demon Daily with me recently. He's how do we describe Dylan? Very valuable member of the team. Former student, killed it, about to go to Harvard, who's been writing ask explanations, like dozens of ask explanations every day. Dylan's great. Anyway, okay, here comes this lengthy multi-paragraph question. I have been studying lightly since October and properly since January, committing 100% versus 98%, as you said. I think I was nervous to fail and didn't want to commit in case I failed. It took some internal reflection to move past this, and I feel better embracing the test and challenge. Who knew the LSAT would also be therapy fodder? The upside down smiley face. Even though I have to trick myself and do a little dance beforehand to hype myself up, I feel excited to study and am enjoying the process. I drill every day and have been doing timed sections 3 to 5 times a week, rotating through the sections. I always watch every video or read explanations on anything I miss or guessed on, even if I got it right. Any comments so far?
Watch every video or read explanations. Okay, hopefully you're not watching all the videos on one question, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's times where there's like 5 videos or 10 videos of the same thing. Mm-hmm. I would rather you understand one of them than just like tick the box on all of them. You know, if there's a written explanation, I have a feeling that probably is the most efficient way to get to understanding. Just seeing it there in plain English. We misspeak all the time, right? We just don't speak as precisely as we write, especially with the benefit of editing. And so it's like, boy, if there's 6 videos and a written explanation, I'd hate to think that you're just like, well, let me watch all 6 of these videos and then skim through the written explanation and then potentially still not understand it.
Hopefully Anon means when Anon says every, he's referring to like the explanation every time he misses a question, but not
one
every video.
It's a perfect illustration of what we never stop talking about, right? Which is like, lawyers are just so literal. We have to be dealing with the actual words that are on the page. So it's like, well, that's what you said. You said you watch every video. You said, I always watch every video. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if we take you literally at your word, we probably think you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I don't, one should be enough if it makes sense. Like, watch the one that's upvoted and that's probably the best one. And if that doesn't make sense, watch another one. But I mean, you don't need to be a completionist about the videos. There's too many of them. I have heard you both discuss your thoughts on the appropriate cadence for full practice tests and was hoping for some clarification on when and how I should be taking full, that is 4 sections in one go under timed conditions, tests, especially in the time immediately prior to the real test. On one demon lesson, you note to take 20 practice tests before test day. I've also heard you say that drilling one question at a time and timed sections merged together are foundational and a good way to gauge your scores. If I need to be taking 4 section tests 1 to 2 times a week per Dylan's recommendation, I am willing to do that. I'll just need to rethink my timeline and also see about stepping back from my full-time job. Right now, my method of 1 to 2 hours a day of deep studying fits within my work schedule. I don't know if I could show up effectively for work and do the 1 to 2 practice tests a week. Again, that's fine, but I need to plan for it. So at that point, I was a little bit like, Dylan, are you telling people that they have to be doing 1 to 2 full tests a week? That doesn't sound like really that great of advice. But
No, we're always advocating 6 to 7 tests per week, one a day.
Yeah. People don't get sarcasm. Ben
Like,
does
wait,
not
what?
mean that.
People are writing that down.
Ben
How
does
am I
not
going to
mean
do
that.
it? No,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
No. We maybe one test a week. Now, okay, as it comes out, diagnostic for this anonymous who's writing in, diagnostic of 166, then a full practice test in March at a 172. Okay, then down to a 160, which you know your own problem, anonymous. Like don't pretend like you don't know. So anonymous goes, well, then I got a 160 2 weeks later, but I'm thinking that this is because I took it in a public place with distractions, which is what I had available at the time. Okay, but was foolish. Yeah, you're acknowledging that was a dumb thing to do. Don't take full-timed practice tests in less than optimal conditions. You'd be practicing underperformance. Why are you practicing underperformance? Okay, don't do that. Okay, question is, what cadence should I be taking full 4-section tests versus doing the section merge method? My thought was, when people are scoring in the 170s, it becomes a lot less onerous to do a full test.
Absolutely.
Because, you knock out those 4 sections, that takes 2 hours and 20 minutes, 2 hours and 30 minutes if you give yourself a short break.
Yeah.
2 hours and 30 minutes ain't shit. Like, you should be able to come up with that once a week. I can't imagine that you can't come up with that time once a week. And then your review, because you're scoring so high, your review won't take as long, assuming you're not watching every video.
I mean, people ask all the time, how many full-length tests should I take? And I think we've kind of settled on this general rule of thumb that's like, hey, when you're just starting out, you're probably doing one every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks. I mean, it doesn't really matter on some level, but it is strange when someone doesn't take a full-length test ever, and you're like, okay, why don't you experience that? But then as you get better, like you said, it takes less time to do it. Well, it doesn't take less time to do the actual test, but it takes less time to review it, a lot less time. It's a lot easier for you to review because everything you are reviewing, you get faster, right? So then I start to expect people to do them maybe once a week, or maybe twice a week if you're really good. But it's not necessary, because if you don't have that kind of time in your week, you can just do time sections.
Yeah. I always say, I don't care if you never do a full sit down in one sitting. Honestly, I don't give a shit. As long as you're doing 35-minute sections regularly and you're used to 35 minutes, that's how much time you have. You're probably not going to finish. You don't care whether you finish. All you care about is being accurate on the questions that you're attempting. Maybe sometimes you finish, or on games especially, you get to the point where you're going to finish perfectly just because you've made the games so easy.
Yeah.
At that point, if you don't ever, I didn't do any full tests before I took my test. It is very clearly not necessary, and it's not sufficient. So you want to do full tests? Okay. You don't want to do full tests? Maybe also okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think you and I might disagree there. I do think that, hey, test day, you're going to do 4 sections relatively back to back. I would prefer that people experience that.
Sure.
At least a few times.
If you're afraid of it, then yeah, do full tests. If you really don't want to do it, then yeah, do some full tests. But
it doesn't necessarily have to be about fear. It's just recreating the environment that you're going, like recreating the experience that you're going to experience. If
you have test anxiety, or
you just want to recreate the experience. I mean, I feel you're making these exceptions for.
I'm saying here are some reasons why you might want to. I'm not saying that that's an exhaustive list of reasons. There might be other reasons as well. Okay. But there's a certain type of person where your rational brain is going to understand that it doesn't really fucking matter. Like, if you can play the game in 35 minutes, then you can play the game in 4 times 35 minutes. It's not a test of endurance, right? Like the purpose of it is not like, well, you really need to gear up for this. You better be ready for that 2.5 hour marathon. It's because it's just not like it goes by in a flash. It's just not that big of a deal. And if you're good enough at the content of the test, then it shouldn't be a big dramatic thing, right? Oh, how about this, Ben? I think maybe you would agree with this.
Okay.
Do it once, get a 170, whatever, and then we really don't give a shit if you ever do it again. Like you're good at,
Yeah.
you know that you can do it. Like
yeah. Well, and then you've experienced it too, right? So
Yeah.
I guess my hesitation with just saying you don't ever need to experience this is that so the LSAT requires a certain level of focus. Obviously, the better you get at that, the less draining that is on you, right? And so, but I'm still curious. Like, okay, you can sit down and you can do what it takes, and you can engage in the test the way you should engage with it for 35 minutes. Okay, now do that again, and do that again, and
Yeah, and
do
I
that
guess
again.
something about having the sections coming at you in whatever order is kind of useful, right? Like if you just hit start and you don't know what the first section is going to be, and the LSAT rolls the dice and it's like, well, here you go with some reading comp, or well, here you go with some logic games, and it's like and then section 2 is something different, and then section 3 is something different, and then section 4 is something different. Okay, I can see how that might be worth experiencing a time or two. And when I say I don't care if you never do it, I'm speaking in absolutes. And sure, do it. I guess what I don't want people to do is to have like this, because it's clear to me that Anonymous is like fetishizing it to a certain extent. Like Anonymous is like, I need to know exactly the precise cadence for, is it one test a week? Is it 2 tests a week? Is it, I need to know exactly. And it's like, dude, let's get fucking real. Your next paragraph, you say you suck at reading comprehension. Okay.
Yeah.
Get better at reading comprehension. Like your problem is not the cadence of your practice tests. Your problem is you suck at reading comp. You know, you've neglected it. What are you going to do about that? To skim through here, right? To skip some of Anon's wall of text, but it's like, I either get a perfect score or I misgauge the tone on the last passage and miss 4 or 5. What? You didn't miss 4 or 5 because you misgauged the tone.
Maybe by misgauge the tone, Anon really means that he misunderstood what the main point was.
Yeah, that's what he means. You mean you didn't comprehend the passage. That's what you mean. You did not comprehend the passage. If you miss 4 or 5, that's because you're racing, you're just not solving the questions, or you did not comprehend the passage. It's not so subtle as like, oh, you just didn't catch this fine nuances. No, you don't know why they wrote that passage. You have no idea what they're talking about. You just you whiffed on your understanding of the main point. Because if you're missing 4 to 5, you're essentially randomly guessing on the questions. If you miss 5 out of 6, that's worse than random guessing. Just keeping it real. But it's not like, oh, I kind of got it. No, you didn't. You got less than 0.
It's only mildly worse, but it still is worse.
But it is literally worse than random guessing. If you miss 5 out of 6, that is worse than random chance. So let's face that.
Yeah.
That's not like, oh, I missed the tone. That's you missed the boat. Okay.
Yeah.
There's too much here.
Well, we only have one more paragraph, maybe, right?
I guess I got lost in it. It's like, Anon, you're apologizing for the length of your email. You could have just edited it down. I hate to like yell at people who earnestly write us asking for advice, but I'm giving you long-term advice for like your life. When you write people asking for help, don't apologize for how long it is. Never do that. Just edit it instead. There's one more question in here. Oh, what's the last LSAT date you recommend for those applying to start law school in 2023? I think we have a perfect world answer, and then we have a exceptions answer.
Yeah, perfect world would be August. Have everything done, have your best score on record by August so that you have a little extra time. It's like showing up to meetings 5 minutes early as opposed to 2 minutes late.
Yep.
You have the time to get everything in order so you can apply on day one for most schools, which is early September. Some schools, day one may be early October, but the point is you're ready for any school that's going to open its application cycle in September, and you have all your ducks in a row.
Yep.
And you're going to come up with things that you realized, oh, shoot, actually, I kind of want to redo this thing in my personal statement. Okay, great. You have time. You have your best score on record. But yeah, sometimes you don't get your best score by August. So maybe you end up taking it in September or maybe even October. But boy, every test you push off, you're just reducing your chances of getting the best scholarship you could
We
get.
literally saw scholarship offers coming in last year in September for the following September. I have no evidence that that's going to change. If anything, the scholarship game seems to be picking up. So I think having those applications in at the beginning of September, if you really want to play the game the right way, and if you really want your best full ride offer, I think you got to get those applications in early. There are some exceptions that can be made for, let's say Anonymous gets a 169 and thinks that he or she can do better. And there are some schools where a 169 is going to get you a scholarship anyway, so you might as well just go ahead and throw in your applications. But he's talking about Stanford. He's a Stanford undergrad, by the way.
Yep.
And if he's shooting for those top tier law schools, I wouldn't throw in an application to Stanford with a 169. I would wait until I had that 175. Some of those very top schools, I think Yale just doesn't make any decisions until January or something. So it can be okay to apply a little bit later to some of those schools. But for all the other schools, if you're looking to follow our advice and don't pay for law school, then you really, ideally, you're going to have your application in at the beginning of the cycle. And if that means you have to wait and just start law school in 2024, it makes no difference ultimately.
Yeah.
I know you think it makes a difference. I promise you, a year from now, you're going to realize it makes no difference whatsoever when you start law school. I still haven't had a single alum tell me, I wish I would have started law school earlier. That is a thing no one has ever said to me. Has anyone ever said that to you? I just really wish I would have started law school last year instead of waiting for this year.
No one cares. No one's ever said that.
It's like next thing you know, they're graduating, right? That's our experience from our end of the deal. It's like the next day, it feels like.
Yeah.
And this person that we worked with throughout their application and their LSAT and everything, and this person is like graduating from law school. Or you see on LinkedIn that they're now hired at some law firm.
Yep.
That it's like tomorrow. It's just overnight. It's just boom. It's just here before you know it. And that's true even if they waited an additional year as part of their cycle.
Well, here's your question, right? Has anyone ever said to us, oh, I wish I would have started law school earlier? No one's ever said that. But what people have said over and over and over again is, I'm so glad that I took away my applications with a 160 or whatever. I removed them. I took the LSAT again, got a 170 something, applied, and am on a path that's radically different from what I would have been if I had just stuck with my original plan.
Yeah. John Yin, who's been on the daily before, former student of ours, Gloomhaven buddy of mine, he was about to go to Wash U in St. Louis and not like on a half scholarship.
Which people would be celebrating.
Which is garbage because that school gives so many full rides. He would have been getting scammed at Wash U.
Yep.
With his like 168 or whatever it was. He ended up taking at least one more year. I think might have been 2 more years, but ended up going to Harvard with a 178. And it's like, okay, well, boy, That's a big difference.
It's a totally different life. It's a different person. In 10 years, you're gonna meet him and be like, okay, wow, what have you been doing? It's like astronomically different.
Oh yeah, just
wildly,
Yeah.
wildly different. I heard this quote the other day. It could definitely devolve into like a platitude, because on some level it is, but I think it's still true. The quote is, hard choices, easy life. Easy choices, hard life. And I think sometimes people find this to be a very hard choice. They're like, oh, I just cannot wait another year. But if you make that hard choice, boy, you're just setting yourself up for success versus setting yourself up for mediocre success.
Yeah, I think we can leave it there. I think that's a good way of putting it. I would encourage Anon taking that into consideration. Why do you need to start? I would question the foundational assumption that you think you need to start law school in 2023. Other places in this, he's a 3.7 computer science from Stanford. But, unfortunately, 3.7 is not that great when you're applying to Harvard and Stanford and Yale Law School. So you really need the LSAT. But he's like, maybe I should shoot for the stars, maybe even above 172. It's like, well, wait a second, dude. To compete in these very high levels, you probably need a 175 plus.
Mm-hmm.
Computer science majors, by the way, do better than any other major on the LSAT. And so you can get there, but like you need to get your grind on the reading comprehension and figure out your problems there.
Yeah, take 6 months if you absolutely need that. That sounds like way more than you'll need, but take the time, crush it, and then get above the 75th percentile for these schools. And now you can actually consider them.
Don't rush into this, man. Take another year and just like waltz in through the front door to Harvard, Stanford, Yale with your
or for free at like the top 10 programs.
For free at Michigan or UCLA or like plenty of other great schools. Give yourself more options instead of just rushing through, trying to sneak in the side door. Don't do it that way.
So today we have an email here from Pedro.
All right. Email says, hello, Ben and Nathan. I have a question for you, and I will ask it through a hypothetical. Suppose student A has both a very high GPA and LSAT. Student A applies and gets accepted to Harvard and Chicago Law School. Obviously, more schools should be included. Parentheses, apply broadly. That's one of our policies here at LSAT Demon. And I'm looking forward to hearing, Ruth, whether you applied broadly since you're headed off to law school this fall. But for the sake of my question, let's focus on these two. Fortunately, Chicago Law School will be giving student A a full ride scholarship. Harvard, on the other hand, will not be giving any scholarships to student A. Here is my question. Should student A turn down Harvard and go to Chicago? Suppose location is not a deciding factor here, and student A is happy to study law at either Chicago or in Cambridge, given that both law schools are prestigious. Is the $200,000 debt for a law degree from Harvard worth it? If so, students, if they get accepted to schools such as Harvard or Yale, should they immediately accept and ignore all offers from other law schools? If not, if a full ride is worth it, then what is the point of applying to Harvard or Yale? What do you think? Many thanks, Pedro. Well, Ruth, you just told me that you're headed off to Yale this fall.
Yes, and I was also contemplating actually some full rides. So this is, in my case, maybe not so much of a hypothetical. I will say, though, that Pedro has made this, I think, a bit more of an either or than it often is in most cases, right? So it is true that some students who apply to a place like Harvard or Yale know that they won't be eligible for any financial aid. But I think most people, or at least the median student, tends to be eligible for at least some money, given the need-based program. So that is one initial difference.
Yeah, Pedro seems to, and maybe he comes from money or something.
Sure.
And so he just knows, well, yeah, I'm not going to get any of that need-based aid. He does seem to be setting up like this, you might even call it a false dichotomy here, right? Where it's just like, well, it's all or nothing. It's either like Chicago for free or Harvard. What do you think about that? Harvard at full price. What do you think about that?
Exactly. And so it is true that there are some people, and I've met people who say, look, I know exactly what I want to do. I want to work in the public interest. And even though I'm a highly qualified student, I will not be applying to these types of need-based only schools, right? Harvard, Yale, and Stanford, because I'm in it for a full ride or nothing. And that is a choice that some people, even the people, right, with those 175 plus top of the line GPAs might make. But it's not everyone's decision. And I think for that reason, going into the cycle, you need to have a bit of an idea of what it is that you want to do with your degree. And that will help guide you to think for whether these Harvards or Yales might be worth it in any particular instance. So to the question of if 200 grand of debt is worth it, I think the only correct answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Some people, I think, will find that it's worth it to them if they have a very targeted view of the type of job that they want, and if they feel like the connections of these kinds of schools is going to help them. But I'll also point out that at this point in time, what is considered sticker is probably honestly going to be pushing more into 300. And so that's something to also be really cautious about, is that the price of these schools goes up every single year. And you're also, unless you have savings or you have other support, going to need to factor in the cost of living, which is pretty substantial over 3 years.
And interest
Yes.
rates are going up.
Yes. And probably, I mean, this is getting into policy speculation, but I believe that the student loan pause will probably end soon, which means that your loans will be accruing interest that'll like capitalize the day you graduate. And so when we're looking at 6 figures, that's also something kind of serious to think about.
Oh yeah. You could easily graduate with $300,000 of debt.
Yeah,
from
fast.
any of these schools. Even if you're there on a full ride, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we see a lot of schools now that have like, oh, it's a full tuition scholarship, and then you just have to pay $1,500 a semester in fees
And support yourself while not working.
and living expenses, food and rent and whatever. And so it's like, well, wait a second now. First of all, you're charging, I don't know, why are fees separate from tuition? That's just like a total scam. That's like such bullshit. Some schools, I was looking the other day, some schools have like $75. Their fees are like $75. And then other schools have like $1,500 is their fees. And it's like, well, wait, what? What is this for? How is that separate from the tuition? What are you doing? And it's like, it's all just bullshit, right? Anyway, you can definitely go on a full ride and still graduate with 6 figures of debt if you're not careful.
If you're living in New York City, the schools publish their budgets for cost of living, and this is all things you can look up, but it's about $30,000 a year. And so there you go. So
yeah, easily. By the time you factor in living expenses, you go buy yourself a fancy suit because you have to go to on-campus interviewing. People, it's too easy to borrow money. Like they just really let you borrow a lot of money while you're in school. They jack up the like estimated living expenses so that you can just borrow as much as you can. And some students are just like, yeah, I mean, I think most students probably are like, yep, put me down for the max. Just send me the max. I want the most free money I can get. Well, it's not free money, and it's going to start accruing interest, and you're going to end up graduating with this wild amount of debt. Anyway, yes, I think the answer, Ruth, you are correct. The answer is always going to be, it depends. My advice, I would always as well tell Pedro, hey, cross that bridge when you come to it. I mean, we can certainly talk about this in hypothetical terms, but you're going to have to make this decision for yourself once you actually have these, offers on the table. And I don't know that the offer really is going to be a full ride at Chicago and pay full price for Harvard. Maybe it is for Pedro, but we don't really know. It's real hard to just kind of say in this vacuum. Let's back up a little bit, Ruth. You were a student of the LSAT demon. You ended up working your way up to an LSAT in the high 170s.
I scored a 177.
177 on the official test. You applied. Did you follow all of our advice? Apply early, apply broadly, apply with your best LSAT score?
I applied a little bit later than recommended, but other than that, I did apply broadly and with my best LSAT.
Okay. How many schools did you apply to?
10.
10 schools. Yeah. That's so some people are going to be like, well, that's contrary to Nathan and Ben's advice. Not really when you're a candidate like Ruth. Ruth has a 177 and good grades.
Yeah, I had good grades. I had a 380.
So good grades and a 177. At that point, you can kind of narrow your list a little bit. Like she had good reason to believe that she was going to get into the top schools. So then there's no point in like fishing for schools down at the lower levels. I assume you applied mostly to schools that are like top 14-ish.
It was mostly those top schools. And I had a couple schools I also applied to in the New York area, which is where I live and where I kind of hope to practice.
Yeah.
So that was also part of the plan.
Yeah. And okay, so you have made your final decision. You're going to Yale.
I have committed. I will be attending Yale in the fall.
You're going to Yale this fall. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Nobody deserves it more than you. How did you make that? What, if you don't mind sharing, like, what was your best other offer? Like, what were you really thinking about?
Sure. So I was actually in this very close to the decision. I got what's called the Rubenstein Scholarship at Chicago, which is a full ride and it includes a stipend. So that's an actual debt-free degree. And I considered it very, very seriously because Chicago has a really great reputation. It seemed like there was a lot of things about it that were appealing to me. And obviously, the money is a really huge deal. So you want to make sure when or if, Pedro, you're in this kind of situation, that you consider that with a certain degree of seriousness. I think the reason I ultimately decided on Yale was that when I was going into this process, that was my goal, was to hopefully be able to attend there. And I had a very specific set of goals that I hope to accomplish when I graduate, including federal clerkships and all of these things, right? So I was considering that when I was making my decision. And another thing I was considering was, what is my actual student experience going to look like? Yale is in my hometown. I'm from New Haven, Connecticut. This is an environment in which I felt really immediately comfortable when I went to the admitted students day. It was a lot of these sort of softer factors. And I did also consider how much am I personally, given the amount of aid that the school gave me and my other resources, going to have to put down. And I decided, to me, it's worth it. I think that there is something I'm going to be getting from this experience. But it was not an easy decision. And it's not something that is, I think, can be made automatically just purely on the merits of this scholarship versus what a Yale degree does. It's very dependent on who you are as a person, what you hope to do in your career, and some other personal factors. So
yeah, so it's mid-April. You just, as we record this, you just made the decision recently?
Last week. Yeah.
Last week. Okay. So were you able to see like all the numbers before you made your decision?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. You saw the full package from Yale. You saw the full package from Chicago. You're like just in a spreadsheet, like actually comparing the numbers to each other.
Exactly.
Cool. Anything else you want to, any other additional advice for Pedro?
I don't think so. I think I wish Pedro all the best. And I really feel like in this type of situation, this is something I heard from a lot of people. You can't truly go wrong. I think that's true. If you know your why of why you're going to law school and you have things that you want to accomplish, be confident in the decision that you make, and you will definitely be able to have a great career in both places.
I agree. You can't, it's hard to go wrong at the top levels, though. We're talking about the top levels. It's hard to go wrong. It's easy to go wrong everywhere else. So be careful. Like really, because like the thing is, slippery slope arguments are kind of inherently dumb, but I'm going to make one anyway. Because it's like, as soon as people are like, well, I mean, you said it was okay to pay for Yale and turn down a full ride plus stipend to Chicago. So then why can't I pay for Chicago and turn down a full ride plus stipend at Columbia? And then if I say that's okay, then they'd make the same argument like a couple steps down the line. And the next thing you know, they're like paying full price at, I don't know, like some school that's just like, yeah, it's okay. It's fine, but it's not like special, And I mean, there's, you can't argue against like Yale is special. It's that it is unique and something different. And so you're going to ultimately have to make that decision for yourself, whether it's worth it for you. Pedro, I would though strongly encourage you to at least apply to these schools, right? Do you agree, Ruth?
I agree. I totally agree. You might be surprised by the aid offering as well. So give it a shot. Why not?
Yeah, don't shut the door on yourself. I mean, like if you're a credible candidate to get into Harvard and Yale, like don't be lazy about it. Like go ahead and put the work. It's going to take some work, It's like not easy to apply to those schools, right? You have to do some extra shit probably.
Harvard,
or for
no,
Yale,
anyway. Yes. For Yale, yes.
One essay.
Mm-hmm.
Is that all it was? One essay?
Yeah, it's 250 words. So it's short, but actually it being short makes it a bit more challenging, probably. You want to get all of your ideas into the most brief form possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, lawyers, like, you should not be afraid of any amount of work, really, to be honest. I mean, you should never be like, oh, that's too much work, I don't want to do it. The lawyers do all of the work all the time. So, yeah, but go ahead and put those applications in if you're a reasonable candidate for those schools. And then you can cross that bridge when you come to it. And if you actually end up in that spot where you're making that very difficult decision, it's a good problem to have at that point. And then it's going to be real hard to make a mistake.
Totally agree.
We have a question here from, it's a logical reasoning question from Prep Test 73. You want to read it?
Yeah, let's do it. Vacuum cleaner salesperson. Okay, what are they going to say? To prove that this Super XL vacuum cleaner is better than your old vacuum cleaner, I ran your old vacuum once over this dirty carpet.
Okay. I'm like waiting for the other shoe to drop here. It's like, well, you haven't yet fired up the Super XL. I'm like wanting to see the Super XL in action.
Yep.
But
I'd like to see them run side by side, right? It's like
exactly.
How do I compare?
Like, are these two-handed vacuum cleaners? Is there not a way that you could do them both at once? Or okay, you're also, where'd you get my vacuum cleaner? I'm like, this person.
Did you break into my house
at the door with my vacuum? Hey, give me back my fucking vacuum cleaner.
I saw you throw it away last week, and I grabbed it.
Yeah. Okay. So the salesperson has my vacuum cleaner and ran it over this dirty carpet. Hope it's not my
this must be
carpet.
A door-to-door salesperson.
That's what I'm imagining, is a door-to-door salesperson doing a demonstration in my house, running my vacuum over a dirty carpet. And then what? I don't know. I'm waiting to see what the other thing is, because this is already... I'm expecting this person to be a charlatan.
It's also weird too that this person is speaking in the past tense, right? Like, this is what I did. It's like, can you just do it in front of me right now? Then I ran the Super XL over the same area.
Okay. Wait, so you did my vacuum first, then you ran the Super XL over the same spot. Okay, I think I know what you're going to say next. You're going to be like, the Super XL still caught some dirt. So the Super XL gets out dirt that my old vacuum cleaner did not, which is a fact. But it's not really a very good experiment, because you didn't run the experiment the other way. I mean, we'd at least have to run the experiment again, which is to run the Super XL first and then run my vacuum over that same carpet. But anyway, is that where it's going to go? Let's see.
All that dirt that the Super XL picked up is dirt your old vacuum left behind.
Uh-huh.
Comma. Proving, folks, the Super XL is the better vacuum.
Yeah, well, you didn't prove shit. I mean, that's not science. Like, I can see why you're a vacuum salesperson, not like a fucking scientist, because your methodology here, you didn't prove anything to my satisfaction.
Yeah, maybe the customers are not scientists either if they're buying this shit.
Yeah, this vacuum salesperson would be in for a little lecture on I'm not a scientist myself, but I feel like I know enough about the scientific method to know that you would have to run the experiment the other way in order to be able to determine anything. I mean, like, I am not arguing with any of the vacuum salesperson's facts, including the part where he said all that dirt that the Super XL picked up is dirt your old vacuum left behind. That's a fact.
That is a fact.
My
That's
vacuum
true.
went over the carpet and then the Super XL picked up that dirt that had been left there by my old vacuum. You have proven that my old vacuum does not pick up all the dirt, but you have not proven that the Super XL is the better vacuum, because my vacuum, I mean, how dirty was this carpet? My vacuum might have done an amazing job. My vacuum might have gotten 99.9% of all the dirt off of the hella dirty carpet.
And if you had ran it again, it would have gotten it. Yeah.
Well, and it might have picked up even more dirt, right?
Like the stupid XL.
Well,
yeah.
You know what I would want to do is I would want to run my vacuum again over this carpet right now.
And see
right?
if it
Like
gets
empty
even
the
more.
chamber.
Yeah.
Empty the thing out, like put a new bag in, and then run it over the carpet again. Yeah, I remember those. God, those were bad. And then go. But see, on a third time, my old dusty vacuum picked up dirt that the Super XL left on the second time.
Can I sell you my old vacuum?
Yeah. No. So the only part here that I'm actually arguing with is I'm granting all the facts. I am not disagreeing. You did all the things that you said you did, except for the part where you got to your conclusion that you're drawing, which is the Super XL is a better vacuum. You have not proven that to my satisfaction, because you would have to, at the very minimum, you would have to run the same experiment, but do the Super XL first and then do my vacuum. Not only that, but is this even the best test of how to prove what vacuum is better than what other vacuum? I mean, you're only talking about one metric here, which is how much dirt is picked up. What about how loud it is? What about how hard it is to push around? What about how hard it is to clean the chamber or the vacuum bags or whatever? There's a million other factors here that we would want to know about in order to determine what the very best, possible vacuum was, not just how much dirt it picks up. But even if we were only, even if the conclusion wasn't so broad, even if it said proving the Super XL is better at picking up dirt,
we'd still be.
I still wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
Because
did you mention price? Did we?
Oh yeah, no. Sure. I mean, a million. Yeah, exactly. Price, a million other things. How expensive are the bags that we need to use? Like, oh, well, this vacuum's cheaper, but that one uses more expensive bags or whatever.
Every week. Yeah.
How often do we have to? Yeah. Like there's potentially infinite. How bad is it on the environment? How much electricity does it use? Mm-hmm. How storage? How hard is it to store this thing in the closet? How dangerous is it? I mean, you go on all day with different factors, but even on the one very narrow factor of how much dirt it picks up, they still haven't gotten there. And that's the part that I would actually be the maddest about here, right? Because I feel like I would want to engage them on their actual argument rather than thinking about all the arguments that they didn't make. I mean, I certainly have those chambered and ready to go if I had to totally defend against this argument. But the first thing, as I would just talk about, I would use their actual facts and grant them all of those facts and then go, but logically those facts just don't justify this conclusion because you didn't do the experiment the other way around. Why didn't you run them side by side and figure out which one picked up more? Or why didn't you at least run this exact experiment again, but do the Super XL first?
Agreed. By the way, when I was a kid, I had to vacuum my house, and my vacuum was metal. It was badass. It worked really well.
I think that we had a metal one too. Yeah, with those. I don't know if people have vacuum bags anymore, because now it seems like all the modern vacuums just have a plastic chamber that you
empty into the trash can. Yeah.
But they used to have these disposable bags, and they would just, when you had to take the bag out, it was just
the dust coming out,
dust, and just dust would go everywhere, and they were just oof. Bad. Yeah, bad times. Anyway.
Cool.
What's the question going to ask?
The question says the vacuum cleaner salesperson's argument is most vulnerable to criticism, to the criticism that it... ...
I think the most important word there is.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where we get to see the real difference between a weaken question and a flaw question, which I never understood the difference between those two at the beginning of my LSAT teaching career. I was like, yeah, weaken, flaw, whatever, same difference.
Yeah.
They're actually quite different.
Yeah.
Because flaw questions are asking us to describe something that is in the argument, like they did this.
Yeah.
I have to be able to prove they did it and then explain why it's wrong that they did that thing. Whereas a weakened question is which one, if true, would undermine the argument. And there, I don't have to prove the answer. Quite the opposite. I have to assume that the answer is true and then think about whether that impacts the argument negatively. So it's critical here that you do recognize that the burden is on you as the test taker. Like, you're vouching for one of these answers. You're going to have to stand up in court and say, yep, they did this thing. I can prove that they did this thing.
Yeah. And
I can explain to you how this thing is a problem. A lot of people want to go to that second step of like, well, this is a problem. If they did that, if they use too small of a sample, well, whoa, okay, but you have to be able to prove that they used too small of a sample. And if they didn't do it, then no matter how bad that is, it's still not the answer.
Yeah. Answer A. Does the argument ignore the possibility that dirt remained in the carpet even after the Super XL had been used in the test?
So here, when an answer starts on a flaw question, when an answer starts with ignores the possibility that, that's really pretty easy to prove because they ignored almost everything. They ignored everything that they didn't literally say.
They ignored, the entire world, the entire universe, except for the 3 sentences or 4 sentences that they discussed.
Right. So can I prove that they ignored the possibility that dirt remained in the carpet even after the Super XL had been used in the test? Yeah, they did ignore that possibility. So I then go to the next step, which is, well, is that a problem? So the fact that the carpet is still dirty after the Super XL, it's not great for the vacuum salesperson, but you can anticipate what they would say if you said, well, but there's still dirt in the carpet.
Yeah, it's cleaner than it was, and it caught stuff that your vacuum didn't. So it's better, even if it's not perfect.
Remember, your vacuum did go over that carpet.
Yeah.
So you're pointing at the carpet. Like that, the problem there is that would weaken your vacuum and the Super XL both. But I think that the salesperson's retort would be, well, no vacuum is perfect. Some dirt will always remain in your carpet. Hate to break it to you.
It's not the biggest objection, right? Bottom line.
Well, the devastating objection is, this is a dumb experiment. Why don't you run it again with the Super XL first and then my vacuum second?
Yep.
Like, it's just not a fair experiment. A is not accusing, it's just not describing the flaw that is obviously inherent in this argument.
It's not the biggest problem.
They did it and it's kind of a problem, but it's not anywhere near as big of a problem as I am anticipating I'm going to see in a later answer.
And notice too, the question says the vacuum cleaner's salesperson's argument is most vulnerable to the criticism that it blah, blah, blah. And if all the other answers turn out to be shit, then maybe we'd force ourselves to accept this. But I highly doubt it. This is just not that big of a problem. B, does the argument take for granted that the Super XL will still perform better than the old vacuum cleaner when it is the same age as the old vacuum cleaner?
It might seem as if they're suggesting that, but you can't prove that the vacuum salesperson has to agree with that. Takes for granted means necessarily assumes. this question's a good opportunity for people to recognize the difference between ignores the possibility that and takes for granted that. Ignores the possibility that just means you didn't think about this, didn't consider this, didn't mention this.
Yeah.
Takes for granted that means you must agree that this thing is true.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure the salesperson would like to say that the
That
Super
this is
XL
true.
will perform better than the old vacuum cleaner when it's the same age as the old vacuum cleaner. But they actually aren't committed to that proposition because they're trying to sell me a brand new Super XL.
And
they're not
their
vouching
argument
for the life of this. They're saying the Super XL is better than your old vacuum cleaner.
Period. End of story. We're not. They're not. His argument does not hinge on. Oh, and by the way, it will last as long or longer than your old one and perform. The salesperson could have said that, but they didn't.
They didn't.
And
right.
That's not the reason for their conclusion.
I can't prove that they must agree that that's true.
Yep.
Next.
C. Does the argument take for granted that because the Super XL outperforms one vacuum cleaner, it is the best vacuum cleaner available?
I can see two things wrong with that.
Yep.
This guy's not claiming that this is the very best vacuum cleaner available. The conclusion of the argument is just the Super XL is better than your old piece of shit vacuum.
Yep.
That's the conclusion.
Yep.
Not that it's the best vacuum cleaner available.
Mm-hmm.
So it's wrong because of that. But it's also wrong because it misdescribes the reasoning. If you pick C, you're basically saying that this guy has proven that the Super XL has outperformed your vacuum cleaner. And I'm not willing to grant that.
Yeah.
I don't think that he has done that. He did not have evidence that the Super XL has outperformed my vacuum cleaner. That was his conclusion, not his premise.
Yep.
So that's at least two reasons why C is wrong. And it's critical here that students recognize how bad these answers actually are. They are frequently wrong for multiple reasons.
Yeah.
And that's why there's like no excuse for missing questions on logical reasoning. Because you're picking your mistakes. You are frequently picking wrong answers that are actually wrong twice or more.
Multiple ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And when you see one of them, okay, well, that's a start. But the best test takers are seeing 2 or 3 often. And that's why they can eliminate answers so quickly and confidently. Because even when I'm unsure about eliminating an answer for one reason, I might be like, oh, yeah, maybe that works. But then I come across another reason. I'm like, well, that's a slam dunk. That is out.
Yeah.
And so I'm spending 10 seconds on an answer, 2 seconds on an answer choice that you're spending maybe 30, sometimes even 60 seconds because someone's debating it over and over again. So confidence comes with knowledge. Anyways, D, does the argument ignore the possibility that the amount of dirt removed in the test by the old vacuum cleaner is greater than the amount of dirt removed by the Super XL?
Again, it does ignore that possibility. You know, it didn't like weigh the dirt.
It didn't address that. Yeah.
That my vacuum collected and then compare it to the amount of dirt that the Super XL collected. All this dude did is you can imagine his just sleazy sales presentation, but he just very dramatically goes to the chamber on the Super XL and holds it up so that I can see all the dirt that's in the Super XL. And he's like, all this dirt was left behind by your vacuum.
Yeah.
And if you came back and said, well, but my vacuum picked up even more, all he would do is go, I know, but why didn't it pick up all this?
Yeah.
And so, your old vacuum very likely picked up more. I mean, it went first. It didn't pick up 0.
Stuff. Yeah.
It very likely picked up more. It just didn't pick up all of it. And so this guy's going to go back to, well, sure, that got a whole big bunch of dirt, but look, there's all this dirt that it left behind, and the Super XL is better, you see, because it picked up all the left behind dirt. And so even though the argument did ignore this possibility, again, it's just not like really pointing out the critical problem. I think this question is a pretty good demonstration of how important it is that you attack the argument in the first place. Because I can certainly see being attracted by A or D.
Okay. E. Does the argument ignore the possibility that if the Super XL had been used first, it would have left behind just as much dirt as did the old vacuum cleaner?
Yeah. Essentially, you didn't run the experiment the other way. Like, you're obviously assuming that if you had run the Super XL first, you think, you're trying to claim that it wouldn't have left all this dirt behind.
Yeah.
But because I never got to see the trial run the exact opposite way, and it wouldn't have been hard, by the way. Like, you've got the carpet right in front of you. Do half of it one way and do the other half of it the other way, and then show me the comparison. Otherwise, this is just a gimmick, like a little party trick, and so you did ignore that possibility. And that possibility is a big problem for you. If the Super XL had been used first, it might have left behind just as much dirt as my vacuum did. And if that were the case, then your experiment is like completely useless to you. And so that's one where they did that. And that problem is so devastating that it would completely kill their entire case. And so this argument is most vulnerable on those grounds.
Yeah. By the way, the correct answer could also have said something like ignores the possibility that if they had, done a different test, one in which both vacuum cleaners were run at the same time, the old one might have performed better. That would have been correct too, because the argument has ignored so many possibilities. But that's true for all arguments, like you said at the beginning.
And if none of the answers were any good,
yeah.
if they wanted to make this question hard,
yeah,
the correct answer could have been like ignores the possibility that cost is a more important variable than the amount of dirt that's picked up in a trial or something like that. And it's like, if I can't pick any of the other answers, then I could end up settling for like, oh, well, okay, I thought it was going to bust like them for their bullshit methodology in this actual study. But, fake study that they did. But they also ignored all these other potentially relevant factors. And if I can't pick any of the other answers, then I could end up settling for that.
Absolutely. And I don't know how much you'd be settling. I mean, the conclusion brazenly says better.
Yeah.
That's just a blanket claim. It's like, okay, well, if there's any factor not discussed that should be considered, then it's not better necessarily.
It would just be tricky because they gave us specifics of a bogus study, right?
Yeah,
like this guy.
It's distracting.
It doesn't even prove that the Super XL is better at picking up dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it would be like the correct answer in that case would be like on this weird technicality of like, well, the conclusion is broader than the study, even though the study didn't even justify a narrower conclusion. We could also say it's a flaw because the conclusion is broader than it would have been justified even if it were a good argument, which it wasn't.
A good study, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, so it is. This email is from Mike.
It says, Ben and Nathan, episode 216 on burnout was so good, y'all, that I listened to it twice. It literally felt like you were speaking directly to me. That's because we were. I can relate to Andrea regarding burnout and blind review. For the longest time, I thought blind review was the way to go. But after listening to your podcast this morning, it made me realize maybe that's why I'm not improving as much as I like. I'd do exactly what you said on the show. I'd do blind review and most of the time get the right answer the second time. But that's because I know that the answer isn't my original choice. Then I'd convince myself that I learned something, skip your guys' explanation, and keep moving forward.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we just talked about this on the show. It's a disaster to do blind review that way. The purpose of blind review is to honestly, openly confront your mistake and really understand your mistake and really understand why the right answer is right This idea that, oh, if I just do it again, as long as I get it right the second time, then I understand it. No, you don't, because you've ruled out the most attractive wrong answer. You've ruled out the one you picked.
Yeah.
Because you know it's not the right answer. Well, that's not how we say do blind review. We absolutely do want you to attempt the question again. But when you get it right, I mean, you should get it right the second time. You better get it right the second time. And I'm still not convinced that you actually understand it, though. Because now I need you to be able to answer my, I keep saying this now, it's 6 questions. Why is the right answer right? Why didn't you pick it? How are you going to avoid that mistake next time? That's one set of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Why is the wrong answer wrong? Why did you pick it? How are you going to avoid that mistake next time?
Yep.
Do you think you could explain that to my satisfaction? Do you think you could explain that to Ben's satisfaction? All 6 of those? And really grapple with it. Like really confront those 2 mistakes that you made to miss that one question.
Yeah.
And it's not just as simple as try it again, get lucky this time. Okay, yeah, I get it.
Well, this idea of doing the question, getting it wrong, and then in blind review, getting it right, and then feeling good about that, it makes me feel like it reminds me of those awkward conversations I've had so many times over the years where you're teaching a class and you start digging into a question or really into a student, and you're asking them to explain their reasoning as to how they got the answer that they did, and maybe they got it right. And they can't answer your questions, and they throw in the flag, and they like just say, yeah, but I got it right. And it's like this like wall, it's like, oh, okay, well, you got it right. Therefore, you must understand it. And yet what they're telling you about how they got to that answer is wrong, right? And then you have other people who get it wrong, and yet they come around and they start to see the reasoning behind why the correct answer is correct and why the wrong answer is wrong. And you're like, okay, like you have a future. I got it right. I can't explain why I got it right, but I got it right. So shut up is not a future.
No. Or even worse, I got it right on my second attempt. And, I can see now it's that one's a better fit.
Yeah, better fit. Yeah.
You don't understand you're not understanding at all. Like you missed your 1 out of 5 guess your first time through, and then you got it right on your 1 out of 4 guess your second time through. That doesn't mean shit. That's that's just completely random unless you can convince me. I mean, I want that question to make perfect sense to you. Yeah. It needs to make perfect sense. Like it's crystal clear. 99% of the questions, I think, you should be able to arrive at 100% crystal clear understanding. Now, 1 out of 100, I'm fine if you're like, oh boy, that's a real nasty one. That one might be above my head for right now. That's okay. But the vast majority of questions that you do, you need to be getting to that point of where it's not just, yeah, I got it right the second time through, or yeah, I think I see. No, you either do fully or I don't think you do at all.
Yeah, I mean, here's a good test. Imagine you're in an auditorium and I turn to you and say, hey, can you get up and just briefly explain that question to the crowd and answer any questions about it?
Yeah.
If you can't do that, then you don't fully understand it.
Yeah. It better not start with you just like rereading every word of the whole argument, or like, or like better not start with you comparing 2 answers to each other. It's like, listen, there's probably a hole in the argument. You need to be able to describe what they did that was stupid. You should probably be able to put that in your own words. Well, they did this dumb thing, or they left out this critical piece of information. And then it turned out to be a sufficient assumption question. So I predicted the answer.
Yeah.
Because it proves the conclusion. Then I'll be sitting there in that auditorium going, bravo, you got it. Notice how easy it was by the time you actually got it. You really got it and it felt easy. Yeah. That's how you know you got it. If it still feels hard, then you don't understand. Anyway, Mike sounds like he made a breakthrough here. Mike continues.
Good. Yep.
I love the advice you gave of giving up the timeline and just doing your best to study however long it takes. You guys are definitely right. I think I experience burnout because I'm trying to fit all this studying into a timeline and get frustrated when I don't see the results I'm working toward. This episode was a good wake-up call to give up the timeline, drop blind review, and enjoy the process instead. Well, drop blind review.
Yeah, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that it's good to think about questions that you struggled on before you have any idea whether you got it right or wrong. So you don't get that clue. You don't get that hint that, oh, that answer is wrong, or I got this one wrong.
Yeah, just as you're answering it that second time through, you can start answering some of my 6 questions, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at, you don't know what the answer actually is. You're trying to find it. You know it's not the one that you picked the first time through. Okay, well, what's wrong with it? What does it say? What does that mean? How does it not answer the question? I mean, it's objectively wrong. It's probably objectively wrong for multiple reasons. Many times. It's wrong twice or more. So tell me what it is about that answer that attracted you. Tell me exactly why it's wrong. Tell me how you're going to avoid picking it next time. And then on the one that you think you're about to pick, you can do all this before you even hit submit on your second time through.
Yeah.
Or before you watch videos, or before you read a written explanation, or before you use an ask button. You can do all this stuff where you go, okay, you know, I really think it's actually B, because here's how B does answer the question. Like, here's how this answer is 100% right. And boy, here's what I thought it meant the first time through. Yeah, half the time it's going to be like, I didn't pick it because I didn't read carefully enough. Okay, how are you going to avoid that next time? Well, I'm going to fucking read more carefully. Yeah, no shit. When are you going to start doing that though? Like, is it going to be tomorrow, or like, will it be next year that you start reading more carefully, or is it going to be like now? Anyway, you can do all that as you're doing blind review, right? Then when you hit submit, it better be right. And then to clarify, I would read an explanation or watch a video just to make sure that we're telling the same story that you were telling. Because sometimes students have wildly convoluted,
overly complicated reasons for why something might be wrong.
Right?
That could work, but you're missing the elephant in the room, which just kills this answer so simply and clearly and repeatably, right?
They're like dragging the couch up the stairwell, you know, angling it around the bend in the stairwell, maneuvering it through the thing. And it's like, you know, meanwhile, when we get to our explanation, it's like, well, but there's a freight elevator. Did you not see that? You could have taken the freight elevator directly.
Yeah, I was wondering where you were going with this analogy. I was like, okay, and the alternative is what?
They do like just
don't move the couch.
Yeah, they do way too much work, right? It's like it's just not as hard as you think it is. Yeah. If you have to burn 100 calories to tell me why an answer is correct, that's not the actual explanation. It's always simpler, right? So
you might have to burn 100 calories to get to the simple explanation, to open your eyes.
Right.
But once you've opened them, then it's an easy, 2-sentence, 3-sentence.
It's nothing. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. So anyway, thank you, Mike. That is excellent. Glad we got you over the hump there. Don't just totally give up on blind review, but do it right, which is really understanding the mistake and really understanding why the right answer is right. Yeah. Then hit submit, then get some help.
Yeah. And by the way, count those successful blind reviews as progress, right? I think the problem is that people are counting timed sections or timed tests or the number of questions that they do every day as progress. And it's like, no, actual progress, a check mark would go next to any time you do a question and then really figure it out. So if someone sits down and they do one question and then they really figure it out, I'd be like, wow, you're making progress, check mark. Versus someone who's like, well, I did 5 questions today, but I kind of rushed through the review. Okay, well, maybe you have a 0.
Yeah, right? That might be nothing. That was like, all you're doing there is gambling. You know, you're just like, you're not that good at the test. You're not really getting better at the test, but sometimes you do better. And so you're like looking for that little dopamine hit of gambling, essentially.
And you're looking for that dopamine hit of, I did 10 questions again today. Yeah, like, okay.
But you never confronted your misunderstandings because it's a little uncomfortable. You never confronted the fact that half of your mistakes come from sloppy, careless, just misreading stuff. And that's a little painful, I
Yeah.
imagine. You know, it's like, I feel bad in class. I'm like, oh, you misread it? Okay. Like, what am I supposed to do? Right.
Yeah.
You know that experience where you're just like, oh, yeah. Okay. You misread the passage. You misread the question. You misread the correct answer that you didn't pick. You misread the wrong answer that you did pick. You
Yep.
misread all 4 of those. So I guess my advice, you know, people are like, so what's your advice for how to improve? We're like,
Slow down.
Read more carefully. I mean, half of our advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool.
Mike. Thanks
Yeah.
for writing in. We got a lengthy 2-part question here from a LSAT Demon student, Nikki. Thank you for your diligent email, Nikki. Ready to tackle it, Ben?
Yeah, let's do it. Hi, Ben and Nathan. Topic 1. I have been practice testing in the mid 170s. That's awesome. Great. My last 3 practice test scores from most to least recent have been 177, 175, and 174. Oh, you're on a downward trajectory. I would.
The people don't understand sarcasm. Don't stop it.
My range for missed questions by section have been 0 to 3 for logical reasoning, 0 to 1 for games, and 2 to 3 for reading comp. I have missed 4 questions total on each test. I missed 1 question on games. On the test, I scored 174. I since have studied logic games more and have resolved that problem.
All right. This sounds like a good problem to have, Nikki. Good. What's your question?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I'm killing it super hard in all areas.
Everybody listening is like
was
super
missing
angry.
1 on games, but now I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Good.
Yeah, good job. You wanted a little pat on your back. Okay. I'm signed up for June. My initial goal score was 175, but I have modified my goal to get at least a 177.
Don't care. I don't care what your goal is. Like your goal is the highest you can possibly get.
Okay. I ideally would be consistently practice testing in the 177 to 180 range by the June LSAT. This gives me some cushion for test day nerves.
What are you having nerves for? God damn, you're totally destroying this test.
Yeah.
You got to be grateful. A little gratitude. Start a gratitude journal, Nikki. I mean, like the vast majority of students are never going to be at this level. You need to start being thankful for where you're at instead of being like so hyper focused on the few that you're not getting. I'm not telling you to, I do want you to be greedy, but like slightly revising your goal up to 177. What? No, you want the best you can possibly get. And I don't know about this cushion idea.
Have we talked about the 85% rule? I heard this the other day.
Let's hear it.
So Hugh Jackman was saying this. I don't know if it's true.
Love
but
Hugh Jackman. He's awesome. Yeah.
He said that when you tell runners to run 85% of their capacity, they tend to run faster than when you tell them to run 100%.
Sure.
Because at 85%, they can focus a little bit more on form and relax into the run.
There's a golf analogy too.
Sure.
You tell young players all the time not to take the club back so far. It's like, just try to make a smooth 85% would be fine. Like
Yep.
I think I always heard it growing up as 90%, but it's like you want to play within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And if like for me, if I ever try to take an 85% swing, if you video it, I'm definitely at parallel or past parallel at the top anyway. It's a full backswing, even if it doesn't.
It's a full swing. Yeah.
I'm not trying to make a full swing. I'm trying to make a half swing. And then I just make like a perfect full swing when I do that. Yeah. It happens all the time where people, you try to lay off. It's like, well, I think 7-iron's a little too much here. Okay, well, let me hit an easy one. Like, cause I don't want to go down to 8 because I know I can't get there with 8. I'll have to muscle up with an 8. So let me just hit an easy 7. And then you make the perfect swing and flush it and just airmail it way over the green. Because your easy 7 is like, no, that's your best 7.
Yeah.
Like maybe what you should have done is hit an easy 8. Like you thought you had to muscle up on an 8, but actually an easy 8 is going to go farther. Yeah. There's definitely something there. How does
So-
this come back to Nikki's question?
Yeah, so it feels like she's trying to do that 100%, right? It's like I got to
Yeah.
get to 177, 180.
Yep.
It's like, okay, just look, you're in the 170s. Just try to land it in the 170s and you'll probably land it in the very high 170s as opposed to forcing it. Okay. So, what live online classes on LSAT Demon would be most beneficial for me to attend?
Well, I mean, my expert level logical reasoning class is called Double Black Diamond.
Yeah.
That happens every
Mhm.
other Thursday. We just do all the hardest LR questions that anybody encountered throughout the week. It's fun. It's a bit of a higher wire act. I teach those questions without seeing the answers. I try to like honestly grind my way through them. But it's hard when it's all the hardest ones that all of our tutors and all of our students in the entire Demon came up with throughout the week. It's just like, oh God, here we go again with all these real nasty ones. That one would be good for you. But really, my classes, besides that one, my classes tend to be all levels, but I love engaging with the very highest performers. So come to any of my classes. I imagine, Ben, you feel the same way, that a real high scorer would be perfect in your class.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I'd be curious what people think when they come to my class. I'm always open to feedback, but oh boy, there are a lot of good classes. It's crazy. I could even see you benefiting from some foundation classes on occasion, just like explaining, like sometimes there are things that we assume we know that we don't know. I think in general, it's not going to be as beneficial as the higher classes, but yeah, I don't know.
I would echo that a little bit. Teaching is the best way to learn.
Yeah.
And so really in any of our classes, the more you participate, the more you're going to get out of it. You can participate in the chat. The chat is like this super vibrant learning environment. I never would have anticipated how good the chat is in Zoom. It's probably one of the reasons why our student achievement has exploded since we moved everything online. I mean, like, hey, live classroom instruction sucks compared to Zoom. It sucks. It's not like Zoom is almost as good. Zoom is way, way better than live classroom instruction, y'all. It's so much more efficient. And the chat is a huge reason why, because the chat gives you this environment where both publicly and privately, you can engage with us, you can engage with each other. People just dump questions. I'm going off on some rant about whatever, and somebody else is like, oh, but I wanted to ask about this. Then meanwhile, 5 other students pile in the chat to answer that question. Nikki, as a high scorer, I would love to see you helping out more in the chat like that. Like look for opportunities where people ask questions and then see if you can explain it.
Yeah, as you explain it, you will realize you're like, wait, I understand this. So then you'll start explaining it, and then you'll realize it and understand it even better than you did before you explained it. And you'll be like, wow, okay. And you'll start implementing it in your practice tests.
That's a really interesting point. I basically expect our teachers to reach out to me asking me things that they don't understand. That's our teachers. That's people who have already scored in the 99th percentile and have been teaching LSAT for a while. I expect them to put stuff onto the Double Black Diamond agenda because they struggled with it. Or like I expect them to use the ask button, or I expect them to, in our public, or in our, private teacher chat on Slack, I expect them to be like, hey, I struggled with this issue. Yeah. Because if you're not, then I don't think you're genuinely like, a teacher is the top student. Well, the top student should be getting confused sometimes. The top student should be like genuinely trying to figure stuff out. It's part of why, Ben, our podcasts have been so useful, right? Is that we get to like kick ideas around all the time. It's not like I know everything. It's not like you know everything. We're just like, well, I don't know, dude. What do you think about this? Like, how do we get there? Right. Yeah. So I think, Nikki, I think you can just engage in any of our classes and try to help people out as much as you can and just deepen that understanding one question at a time. Yeah. You want to continue the email?
Sure. Will Project 180, that was a class that we had before, I think taught by Matt, right? Matt Dumont.
Yeah, you'd have to ask Matt. I mean, he put Project 180 on hiatus because that's his class. And he put it on hiatus because he had, the small matter of law school 1L final exams to deal with. Whether he can fit that in with his summer schedule, I don't know. I just saw on LinkedIn yesterday that he has officially announced he's working in the Maryland judiciary this summer. Congratulations, Matt. He will be around. He will be teaching classes. I don't know if that one specific class, but we do have other like expert level classes, right? So we have logic games mastery. We have all the mastery level classes are meant to be kind of high level classes.
Yeah, I think Nikki's giving the Project 180 like special significance because it has 180 in the title.
Know.
And
that's a little bit of the problem with that name. Yeah.
Yeah. All classes, by the way, are helping you try to get the best possible score. So anyways, her next question, assuming I have access to classes that occurred prior to me signing up for LSAT Demon, should I go back and review the Project 180 classes? You certainly could. That's the thing. If you have live, you have access to all previous live classes that were recorded. So you can go back and you can check it out. And if you enjoy it, sure.
But I don't think it's what you think it means. I don't think that it's not like that was if you don't go to that class, then you're definitely not getting a 180. That's not the point of that class.
No. Okay. But you certainly can go back and find any classes you want and, binge them if you want.
Yeah. And if you're still, you're missing 0 to sometimes 3 on logical reasoning. You're not that good at logical reasoning. I would go back. There's a whole shit ton of my double black diamond logical reasoning class. If you really want the expert level LR, that's where to find that. 2 to 3 on reading comp, I would go look for reading comp help. I mean, I would watch Becca's old classes on reading comp or go to her live classes right now on reading comp.
We're the Netflix of LSAT.
It's true. You can just binge the shit out of the classes that are really working for you. So try different stuff, see which ones work for you. I do think there is something about the live classes online. It's weird, right? Like, I know that I could do yoga anytime I wanted in recorded content. Yeah. I have access to unlimited. I mean, everybody has access to unlimited recorded yoga classes. You could do them anytime. And sometimes I would, but I also really like the sign up for a live online class, like having a commitment of like, well, I'm not doing it right now, but at 7:30, I'm doing it.
Yep.
And then at 7:30, sure enough, I'm there on my mat, doing the thing. So anyway, some combination of those things. You can self-study your way through the recorded classes, or you can register for live classes and have a little commitment device that way.
Yeah. Nikki continues, one thing I'm starting is meeting with an LSAT study group of about 10 people on Discord once a week. We plan to review 2 practice tests together each week leading up to the June LSAT. The group has students of multiple LSAT score ranges from the high 170s to the 150s. I hope that discussing and explaining questions will help me increase my comprehension. It will.
Good.
She continues, how many practice tests should I do in a week? I do 1 section at a time, but usually end up powering through 3 sections from 1 test in 1 sitting. Okay. I mean, do you have time to do that and review them carefully and thoroughly? If so, I don't see a problem with doing 1 to 2 tests a week. Do you have any other suggestions for improving from the mid 170s to the high 170s?
Yes, but it's the same advice as how do I get from the low 170s to the mid 170s. And it's the same advice as how do I get from the high 160s to the low 170s. It's the same advice as how do I get from the low 140s into the mid 140s.
Yeah.
It's the same advice at every level, Nikki. 1 question at a time. 1 question at a time. There's not magic. You're missing questions. Why are you missing those questions?
Yeah.
What is it about the right answer that makes it right? Why didn't you pick it? How do you avoid making that mistake next time? What is it about the wrong answer that makes it wrong? Why did you pick it? How are you going to avoid making that mistake next time? Doing section after section after section and half-assing your review is not nearly as valuable as doing 1 question and thoroughly reviewing it and really understanding it. I have a feeling that right now it's just kind of human nature, people in the 170s, and they just want to see that 179 or they want to see that first 180. And then they just tend to just test after test after test after test.
Yeah.
And half-ass the review, I think, is inefficient. So I would just got to go deeper on fewer questions. That's our constant advice.
Yeah. You know, I was listening to this thing about Tesla's self-driving cars.
Yep.
They have 8 cameras, supposedly. I don't know if this has changed since I watched this video, but they have 8 cameras gathering information all at the same time. And one thing that they're trying to do to train these cars is they take the video clips from these 8 cameras, and then they go in and a human will tag, I don't know how many things, but it sounded like dozens, if not hundreds of things in that video clip, right? And they're essentially teaching the algorithm like, hey, these are things and this is what it looks like. And as I was listening to that, I was thinking about students, and it's like when you do this one question and you really learn it, you really understand where you went wrong, and you answer these 6 questions you keep asking, right? It's like you're tagging correctly. It's like you're setting in place this piece of information that can then be helpful for you as a very advanced biological machine, right? You're not artificial, you're actual intelligence, but you're this machine that basically is learning from this experience and then extrapolating it to all sort of future experiences that are similar to it. But if you don't tag that question, if you don't learn about it effectively, then you're just kind of videotaping a bunch of information and not doing anything with it. It's just like experience as opposed to like learned experience or something that is actually valuable for the future.
Okay, let's see what you think about this next little bit that so Nikki's going to go in now to a reviewing method that she has used. Let's see if this connects to your Tesla example at all.
The purpose of this is to hopefully give LSAT Demon listeners an idea for a reviewing method that I use. I've listened to about 10 Thinking LSAT and 30 Demon Daily episodes. I have not yet heard you two discuss this approach. I'm referring to strategically flagging questions for later review. While taking a practice test, I flag any question that I had to go back to the passage to answer that took me long. Okay. That took me longer than ideal to answer.
I don't like that either.
Or that I was unsure of in any way.
That I kind of get.
Yeah.
So sorry for constantly interrupting, but
go ahead.
You're going to have to go back to the passage sometimes. I mean,
you do for sure. There's some very detailed.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It's just if you're doing it every time, that's the problem, right?
Right. But it's not called reading memorization. It's called reading comprehension. Most of the questions are about the main point. Some of the questions, though, are about specific parts of the journey to get to that main point. And sometimes you have to go back to the passage to find evidence to support one of the answers.
Yeah.
Like, I think they might have talked about this. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, there it is. They said that explicitly. Okay. Well, you're not supposed to have just memorize the whole thing. You're going to have to go back on, I don't know, maybe 1 out of 4 questions on reading comp. I end up going back to the passage. Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say 1 to 2 per passage.
Yeah. So, okay. So 1 out of 3, 1 out of, whatever. Some of them, not probably half of them, but some of them, you're going to go back to the passage. I don't think you need to be distracting yourself by noticing that you're going back to the passage. I think it should just happen kind of naturally. Like sometimes you predict the answer. Most of the time you predict the answer. Sometimes you go, well, probably this. I think they might have said something like that, but let me go get the evidence. Or Bennett says, show me the receipts. I want to go look at I want the proof of this before I vouch for it.
When I think about that proof, I think the most often time that I am going back, I don't know if it's the most often, but it's pretty often. It might be something where the answer says most, and I'm like, wait, was this for most of this whatever thing they were talking about? And then I go back and I'm like, oh, yeah, it says usually here. I guess it was. This works.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, too, that can end up making that answer wrong, right? Because it was only for some of them, or they gave me a couple examples. And
But Nikki seems to think that that's a weakness, right? She's flagging it, and then she's like going to go back. Her next sentence is, I view these as indicators of my weak points. It's like, well, no, I don't think that's, I don't think that that's necessarily a weak point. That's just one where you had to go back and find the evidence for it because it was a kind of a detailed, fiddly answer. I don't see anything wrong with that. As far as flagging questions that took longer than ideal to answer,
that's just a mental game. You're like, you have like a process going on in the side, tracking how long you're taking and deciding whether this question is going to should have taken. I mean, who knows? That's the thing, is that for some of these questions, you're going to answer them in 30 seconds, and others it's going to take 2 minutes, and that's totally normal. That's part of the ebb and flow of these questions.
This method, Nikki, you're training yourself to pay too much attention to the time. I would definitely stop doing that. Some of the questions you're going to answer in a flash. Most of them you're going to answer in a flash. Some of them are going to take a little bit longer for whatever reason. Who gives a shit? Who cares? You're going to get it right or you're not going to get it right. Now, if it's a logic game that you really feel like, oh boy, I failed to unlock this one, there's got to be something else there. That I don't even think you need to flag, because you get done with your timed section or whatever and you go back and you go, yeah, boy, that third game really... I hit a stumbling block on that one. But that's not anything to do with flagging. And I can't imagine flagging individual questions on LR because of this reason, like, oh, that one took me a long time, or flagging questions on RC because that one took you a long time. I just think, like Ben said, you've got this extra junk process running. You're, even if it's only taking up 2% of your brain capacity, this like, how long am I taking? How long am I taking? How long am I taking? Do loop that just never stops. That's gumming up the works. And I would cancel that, Control-Alt-Delete, force quit that program.
Yep.
And just only think about the question.
Uninstall it.
Yeah. Get rid of that. You just don't need to finish. You got to give up on the idea that, well, I skipped one of her sentences. My goal is to identify the area of comprehension that I needed for improved speed and confidence. I just hate it when people talking about improving their speed. And I think it's holding you back, Nikki.
It's interesting because, I mean, at the end of the day, we expect people to get faster, but you just don't want to confuse that with the specific goal of or hyper focusing on that goal of getting faster.
No, you have to go faster by accident. You have to slow down to speed up. You have to do the 85% thing.
You have to do the 85% thing to run 100%.
Yeah, or you have to make your 85% golf swing to hit it 110% as far as you normally do. Yeah. You know, like you got to do less to get more out of it. And Nikki is like, it's very common. Like you can just feel the type A oozing out of this email. Right.
You're starting to get caught up in the process, and processes are good. I think people are more successful when they have a good process in place and then they keep repeating that process over time. You don't make leaps and bounds by, cramming and then doing something else tomorrow. But you don't want the process to become the goal in and of itself, or to become overly technical or burdened by things you assume you need to do that in fact you don't need to do and are actually hurting you. I think your process has got too gummed up with
totally. And you're not going to flag questions on your official test. So now you're like practicing doing a thing that you're not going to do on the real thing. And finally, my final objection to this flagging plan is that I am almost guaranteeing that you are flagging questions as an excuse for not understanding them. You're like, well, I've been taking too long on this one, so I'm going to flag it. And then, maybe I get it right. Maybe I get it wrong. I'll review it later. I'll flag it. And it's like this decision. It's another junk process, right? It's the process of monitoring the time, taking up 2% of her brain. Then she's got another 2% of her brain involved in the do I flag, don't I flag, do I flag, don't I flag? Where do I give up on this one? I know I'm struggling with it. Should I flag it? Well, not yet. Yeah. Okay. Now should I flag it? Well, not yet. Okay. Well, now should I flag it? The time has been using a lot of time. Okay. Well, then, okay. So, yeah, so I'm just going to pick D and flag it. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, wait a second. If you got rid of all that extra bullshit in your head, you might have just been able to sort it out. And with 5 or 10 or 15 more seconds of earnest grappling with the question, you might have been able to sort it out.
Well, also too, think about like when you go to the gym and you're doing weights and it's like you could eke out one more rep or you could just stop early. It's like that last rep is where you're making the most progress. If you can do 12, and yeah, the last one is the hardest one of all of them, but you did it, that's way better than just doing 11 and then being like, okay, well, I'll do 11 again tomorrow. It's like, take this effort and like get into that question and solve it now, today, not tomorrow, not later in the week when you're going to be going to some class about it and probably not even touch on it.
Yeah, I mean, because Nikki's like, well, then the next thing that I do is I read lessons and I attend demon classes on those topics from my flagged questions. And it's like, what topics? I feel like you could have just figured
don't
it
even
out
have
in the moment.
Topical classes, really. Like,
She's turning a one question struggle into an hour worth of potentially just totally fruitless. I would much rather you just do your best on it. If you got it right, then you figured it out. If you didn't get it right, then now you need to do a real serious review
of that question.
Not of a lesson on that question, not of a class on that question, of that question. Why did you get it wrong? Why did you pick the wrong answer? Why didn't you pick the right answer? That one question is what you need to learn, not global, bigger picture takeaways. You don't need to be getting bigger patterns. You need to be getting that one.
The bigger patterns will emerge from a
Right.
serious understanding of that individual question.
Right.
It feels like you're kind of having a loose understanding of that question and then trying to combine that loose understanding with another question and another question. And then it's like, oh, I've deduced some sort of pattern here. And now I'm going to decide that my weakness is this thing. And so then I'm going to go to classes on those topics. There just simply is not, there aren't classes that are that specific. The classes only get specific based on the whatever questions we happen to be going over in that class.
And especially at your level. I mean, you're already in the mid 170s or sometimes scoring 177. Like you need to grapple with individual questions. And I would just do your best to get it right. If you miss it, then you've got written explanations, you got videos, you got the ask button. Definitely use the ask button if you're not already, Nikki. Write really good questions. You'll probably sort it out for yourself half the time. All right, we done with this one?
I think so. Thanks, Nikki.
Email daily at lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks for listening.